Hello everyone, Dan here. I'm going to give you a tutorial on how to use armor in AR mode, both in the table mode and in the one-to-one mode. I'm currently using MACE 2021 R1 as of 13 April and the 3rd March edition of Armor, our URP build. As you can see, I'm in my XR3, ready to go here, and let's go ahead and go over how to launch Armor in AR mode. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to bring up my workplace. So I'm going to hit the smaller button on the right hand side of the XR3 and reach out and just hit workplace. And now I get a representation of my desktop here. So I'm going to bring MACE back up so we can see it. If you go to the View tab and then hit on the Armor plugin, that'll bring up this this window here. We'll make certain that we are connected via shared memory and ensure that our Armor path is pointed to the executable. Typically when you run the installer, it's going to point to this location. And then lastly, we make certain that we have the terrain path mapped out. And we'll verify that by mousing around the entities and seeing that at the bottom our elevation is mapped to armor. So we know that we have terrain for the Pacific Northwest when we launch our tabletop here. Let's go to the options. We're going to have imagery underneath. And if you have a very large battle space, you want to use the low resolution models as opposed to the high resolution models. Camouflage does work. So it might be hard to make out the entities. For this demonstration, however, we're going to have it in the high resolution. And then lastly, we select the AR Varho mode. All right, go back over to settings, and we're going to launch Armor. And what I'm seeing in the XR3 is that I see the loading screen, and if everything has worked properly, should look over to the right and I see the battle space here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click into Armor to make certain that all my key presses are going to be captured by the Armor window. And for this demonstration, I've made it a little small window off to the side just so we can capture the desktop. Okay. So here we have the tabletop in the middle of my room here. It was previously calibrated to fit in this spot. So we're going to go over the calibration method to size the table to whatever you desire here. So we have two different methods of doing this. We can use this with the keyboard and we can use this with the hand controllers. So let's go over the keyboard method first. So again, we have Armor given the focus. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control J, and that starts our calibration process. What we're going to do is use the W, AS, and D keys to move the table exactly where we want. We can use Q and E to rotate the table, and R and F to raise and lower it. Once we're done with that, we hit Control J one more time. That locks in the calibration. And what that does is that frees up the keys, the W, AS, and D keys, to move the terrain within the tabletop. Best practice is probably to zoom out all the way using the period and comma keys. And in fact, you'll probably see just a little bit of stutter in Armor as we load in all this terrain. So you probably want to begin with that to ensure that you have everything loaded into memory, so it's a little bit easier to zoom in and out without any stutter. Okay, so we showed that method, but what about using the hand controllers? So I have the hand controllers here. I'm going to turn them on. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to our XR menu, XR settings, tabletop settings. And then from here, we can use the pads to move the tabletop around. And by selecting each different feature and then rolling your thumb across the thumb pad, you can change what you want about the tabletop. With the size, it's broken apart into both controllers. So one controller controls one axis, the other controls the other axis. And then we turn that off and we're done. All right, so we can also change the depth mapping that we have here, the depth test. You can see that my hand is in front of the Battlespace here, so I can point at things. We have a control right here, the MR depth test range, and when I adjust that, it'll adjust the range in which we can actually test things out. So if I bring this all the way in, you'll see that it breaks the illusion. My hand is now going on the other side, even though my stereoscopic vision is showing the tabletop all the way out there. So we can actually cycle through these. So say you get it into a state where you can't even see the menu anymore. We can easily get back to a good state by hitting the number 3 if you are unattached from a platform. So I hit number 3 once, and you see that we have no depth. My previous setting that I had before, and then we eventually we get back to the setting that we had inside of our menu. So what I'm going to do is cancel out the depth and then turn the depth back down to a manageable size, which is 0.5, which is about arm's length. So that's how you can cycle through the various depth measurements there. We have our calibration in, so we can use the trackpads to move around the battlespace like this. So if I zoom all the way into Mount Rainier in the center, I can use the other controller to scale in and out. So now we get a nice view of Mount Rainier here. And again, on the keyboard, we can do this using the period and comma keys and WASD to move about. We do this because we know that we have customers that can't use wireless devices when using our product, so we give you other ways of controlling. Which segues into another part, which is we can use the Space Navigator. So I have a 6-DoF controller here, and if you take the mouse and scroll up quite a bit, that increases the speed of movement. If I reach down here, you can see that I can use the 6-DoF to move my map around. All right, so we're looking at the map here, and we're seeing that our models are really small, so we're barely making out what's going on here. And aside, if you want to move your menu back and forth, you can just hit the menu buttons. These little buttons right here. If I hit on Entities, Model Scale, I can take the model scale and increase it. In fact, for right now, I'll turn those control zones off. So if I zoom in, we can see that A10, and we see the WES coming out of the A10, by the way. So we can change the model scale that way, but we can also use the plus and minus keys on the keyboard to change the scale. And one thing about increasing the scale is that, and I don't think the video is ever going to really capture it well, because it's only capturing in HD, but you can just really admire the detail that the Varjo XR3 shows. It's really something that you have to experience in person to really admire. So I'm going to make this really easy, go back to a reasonable size. There we go, have our A10. So we have some other information on here. We can turn off the labels, so we don't have any information about the aircraft. We can turn that back on. We started the video with the control zones on, and you can see that with the model scale up, it's not particularly useful. But if we take the model scale down, and I can go one step further if we're doing say we're doing air-to-air debriefing. This terrain really isn't very helpful, so we can just turn that off. And then we can scale things down quite a bit and have a debriefing about the 3D nature of the aircraft there. Turn that back on. So we talked about the ND labels, the control zones. We can turn on and off the WES. So this A10 is just about to roll out. And again, I can see a WES coming from the aircraft all the way down to that BTR 90 that is there. And we can just cycle that on and off. And there we go. We can also change the trail length. So we see the blue behind the aircraft. We could turn that all the way off, and we don't have any trails whatsoever. I'm going to turn that right back on. And lastly, we'll show the engagement bubbles. And over here at SeaTac, I have ZSU 23-4, middle of the airfield. And if I turn on threat domes, we can see the engagement zone for the ZSU 23-4. All right, so you're seeing me move around the Battlespace quite a bit, but say I want to follow this A10. So what I would do is ensure that I have the A10 top lock, so we go to View and have top lock on, so that I have the focus there. Now if I go into Entity Attach, Attach On, you'll see that the A10 is now in the center. And we can see the terrain moving underneath the aircraft there. So we also have some extra modes for table. So we'll go ahead and go through that real quick. We can turn on panels. So as you can see, we're attached to the A10 here, and we get his coordinates and the scale that our map is at the moment. Another thing that we can do is change the mode to a real table with sides that go all the way down to the ground, as opposed to just something that might rest on a real table. And then lastly, we have a vertical representation with a wall. So we can actually stand up and see things up close. Turn the panels off like that. All right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into my entities model scale and bring it down to a model scale of 1. And I'm going to go over to MACE and change who I'm locked onto. So I'm going to bring MACE back up. I'm going to lock on to a known point down here. So we're now locked on to the known point down near the docks. If I go into XR and then change our AR mode from tabletop to 1-to-1, we now have the 1-to-1 mode enabled. So this is a Ready Player Me avatar of myself, and I tell you, it's quite interesting to look yourself in the eye. But everything here, the models are in a 1-to-1 scale. So what that means is that the distances and the size of the models are in a 1-to-1 ratio. And what that also should include is that if I look up in the sky, I should actually be able to see the F-22 that is way up there, and there it is. It might not come across in HD, but there is a F-22 in an orbit about 20,000 feet up in the air. The main reason I could spot them is because we have the trails on. It'd be a really small aircraft up at that altitude. Okay, so that's a good overview of using armor in table and 1-to-1 mode. Thanks. Talk to you soon.